we are going to talk about formulating research design. Here you can see the expected learning outcomes. After studying this lecture, you should be able to understand the importance of your decisions when designing research and the need to achieve methodological coherence throughout your research design. To explain the differences between quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods research designs and choose between these. To explain the differences between exploratory, descriptive, explanatory, and evaluative research. To identify the main research strategies and choose from among these to achieve coherence throughout your research design. To consider the implications of the time frames required for different research designs. To consider some of the main ethical issues implied by your research design. To understand criteria to evaluate research quality and consider these when designing your research. And the final one, to consider the constraints of your role as researcher when designing your research. As we saw in the previous lecture, the way you answer a research question will be influenced by your research philosophy and approach to theory development. Your research philosophy and approach to theory development, whether this is deliberate or by default, will influence your selection shown in the next three layers of the research onion. These three layers can be thought of focusing on the process of research design, which is the way you turn your research question into a research project. The key to this selection will be achieve coherence all the way through your research design. The section number 2, Choice and Coherence in Research Design. Your research design is a general plan of how you will go about answering your research question. It will contain clear objectives derived from your research questions, specify the source from which you intend to collect data, how you propose to collect and analyze these, and discuss ethical issues and the constraints you will encounter. For instance, access to data, time, location, and money. Also, it should demonstrate that you have thought through the elements of your particular research design. Let's start talking about research design. The first methodological choice is whether you follow a quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods research design. The nature of research project will also be either exploratory, descriptive, explanatory, evaluative, or a combination of these. Within your research design, you need to use one or more research strategies to ensure coherence within your research project. We discuss research strategies, their fit to research philosophy, and to quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods methodological choices in section 5. Your methodological choice and related strategies will also influence the selection of an appropriate time horizon, which we will consider later. Each research design will lead to potential ethical concerns, and it will be important to consider these in order to minimize or overcome them. We briefly consider ethical issues related to research design in the section 7. It is also important to establish the quality of your research design, so we will recognize the practical constraints that will affect research design, especially the nature of your own role as a researcher, and briefly consider this in section 9. These aspects of your research design are vital to understand what you wish to achieve and how you intend to do so. You are likely to be assessed at this stage of your research project by your university or examining institution, and your research design will need to achieve a pass standard before you are allowed to proceed. Therefore, you need to have a clear design with valid reasons for each of your research design decisions. Your justification for each element should be based on the nature of your research questions and objectives. Now it's time to mention choice and coherence in research design. It is useful at this point to recognize a distinction between design and tactics. Design is concerned with the overall plan for your research project. Tactics are about the finer details of data collection and analysis. the center of the research onion. Decisions about tactics will involve you being clear about the different quantitative and qualitative data collection techniques, and quantitative and qualitative data analysis procedures, which will be discussed in later lectures. First, we outline the nature of quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods research and how these may be combined to help you to choose and design your own research. The section number 3, Methodological Choice, the use of a quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods research design. One way of differentiating quantitative research from qualitative research is to distinguish between numeric data, like numbers, and non-numeric data, words, images, video clips, and other similar material. In this way, quantitative is often used as a synonym for any data collection technique, such as questionnaire, or data analysis procedure, such as graphs or statistics, that generates or uses numerical data. In contrast, qualitative is often used as a synonym for any data collection technique, such as an interview, or data analysis procedure, such as categorizing data, that generates or uses non-numerical data. This is an important way to differentiate this methodological choice. However, this distinction is both problematic and a little bit narrow. It is problematic because in reality, many business and management research designs are likely to combine quantitative and qualitative elements. This may be for a number of reasons. For example, a research design may use a questionnaire, but it may be necessary to ask respondents to answer some open questions in their own words rather than ticking the appropriate box, or it may be necessary to conduct follow-up interviews to seek to explain findings from the questionnaire. Equally, some qualitative research data may be analyzed quantitatively or be used to inform the design of a questionnaire. In this way, quantitative and qualitative research may be viewed as two ends of one continuum, which in practice are often mixed. A research design may therefore mix methods in a number of ways, which we discuss later. From this broader perspective, we can reinterpret quantitative and qualitative methodologies through their associations to philosophical assumptions and also to research approaches and strategies. This will help you to decide how you might use these in a coherent way to address your research question. We now briefly outline some of these key associations. Let's start from quantitative research design. From research philosophy. Quantitative research is generally associated with positivism, especially when used with predetermined and highly structured data collection techniques. However, a distinction needs to be drawn between data about the attributes of people, organizations, or other things and data based on opinions, sometimes referred to as qualitative numbers. In this way, some survey research, while conducted quantitatively, may be seen to fit partly with the interpretivist philosophy. Quantitative research may also be used within the realist and pragmatist philosophies. On the next slide, you'll see the box number 1, which illustrates the quantitative research design in terms of research philosophy. Approach to the theory development. Quantitative research is usually associated with a deductive approach, where the focus is on using data to test the theory. However, it may also incorporate an inductive approach, where data are used to develop the theory. The next is characteristics of quantitative research design. Quantitative research examines relationships between variables, which are measured numerically and analyzed using a range of statistical and graphical techniques. It often incorporates controls to ensure the validity of data as an experimental design. Because data are collected in a standard manner, it is important to ensure that questions are expressed clearly so they are understood in the same way by each participant. The research is seen as independent from those being researched, who are usually called respondents. A quantitative research design may use a single data collection technique, such as a questionnaire, and a corresponding quantitative analytical procedure. This is known as a monomethod quantitative study, and the figures 5.1 and 5.2 illustrates it. A quantitative research design may also use more than one quantitative data collection technique and corresponding analytical procedure. This is known as a multi-method quantitative study. Multi-method quantitative study. You might, for example, decide to collect quantitative data using both questionnaires and structured observation, analyzing these data using statistical or quantitative procedures. Multi-method is the branch of multiple methods research that uses more than one quantitative or qualitative method but doesn't mix the two. Use of multiple methods has been advocated within business and management research because it is likely to overcome weaknesses associated with using only a single or mono method, as well as providing scope for a richer approach to data collection, analysis, and interpretation. The next is research strategies. Quantitative research is principally associated with experimental and thorough research strategies, which we discuss in later sections. In quantitative research, a thorough research strategy is normally conducted through the use of questionnaires or structured interviews or possibly structured observations. Qualitative research design, research philosophy. Qualitative research is often associated with an interpretive philosophy. It is interpretive because researchers need to make sense of the subjective and socially constructed meanings expressed about the phenomenon being studied. Such research is sometimes referred to as naturalistic, since researchers need to operate within a natural settings or research context in order to establish trust, participation, access to meanings, and in-depth understanding. Like quantitative research, qualitative research may also be used with a realist and pragmatist philosophies. Approach to the theory development. Many varieties of qualitative research commence with an inductive approach to theory development, where naturalistic and emergent research design is used to build theory or to develop a richer theoretical perspective that already exists in the literature. However, some qualitative research strategies start with a deductive approach to test an existing theory using qualitative procedures. In practice, much qualitative research uses an abductive approach to theory development. Characteristics: qualitative research studies participants' meanings and the relationships between them using a variety of data collection techniques and analytical procedures to develop a conceptual framework and theoretical contribution. Pansal and Corley in 2011 point out that while qualitative research is characterized by methodological variations, it remains vital irrespective of the method used to demonstrate methodological rigor and theoretical contribution. Data collection is non-standardized, so that questions and procedures may emerge during the research process that is both naturalistic and interactive. Qualitative research design. A qualitative research design may use a single data collection technique, such as semi-structured interviews, and corresponding qualitative analytical procedure. This is known as monomethod qualitative study. One more time, monomethod qualitative study. A qualitative research design may also use more than one qualitative data collection technique and corresponding analytical procedure. This is known as a multi-method qualitative study. One more time, multi-method qualitative study. You might, for example, decide to collect qualitative data using in-depth interviews and diary accounts, analyzing this data using qualitative procedures. Research strategies of qualitative design. Qualitative research is associated with a variety of strategies. While these share ontological and epistemological roots and common characteristics, each strategy has a specific emphasis and scope as well as a particular set of procedures. Some of the principal strategies used with a qualitative research are action research, case study research, ethnography, grounded theory, and narrative research. Some of these strategies can also be used in a quantitative research design, such as a case study strategy, or used in a mixed method research design, as we now discuss. Techniques associated with the use of particular methods are considered in later lectures. So, mixed methods research design, and let's start from research philosophy. We consider two philosophical positions that often lead to mixed methods research designs. Mixed methods research is a branch of multiple methods research that combines the use of quantitative and qualitative data collection techniques and analytical procedures. In a previous section, we discussed the philosophical position of realism, and in particular that of the critical realists. They believe that while there is an external objective reality to the world in which we live, the way in which of us interprets and understands it, it will be affected by our particular social conditioning. To accommodate this realist ontology and interpretivist epistemology, researchers may, for example, use quantitative analysis of officially published data followed by qualitative research methods to explore perceptions. Pragmatism may also be likely to influence a mixed methods research design. Pragmatists view the exclusive adoption of one philosophical position as unhelpful and choose instead to see this as either end of a continuum, allowing a choice of whichever position or mixture of positions will help them to undertake their research. For pragmatists, the nature of the research question, the research context, and likely research consequences are driving forces determining the most appropriate methodological choice. Both quantitative and qualitative research are valued by pragmatists, an exact choice will be selected on the particular nature of the research. Approach to the theory development of mixed methods design. A mixed methods research design may use a deductive, inductive, or abductive approach to theory development. For example, quantitative or qualitative research may be used to test a theoretical proposition or propositions, followed by further quantitative or qualitative research to develop a richer theoretical understanding. Theory may also be used to provide directions for the research. In this way, a particular theory may be used to provide a focus for the research and to limit its scope. Characteristics of mixed methods research design. In mixed methods research, quantitative and qualitative techniques are combined in a variety of ways. The ways in which quantitative and qualitative research may be combined, as well as the extent to which this may occur, have led to the identification of a number of variations of mixed methods research. Now we are going to briefly consider them. Concurrent mixed methods research involves the separate use of quantitative and qualitative methods within a single phase of data collection and analysis. Using a concurrent mixed methods design should provide richer data than a mono-method design and be shorter in timescale as well as more practical to undertake than a sequential mixed method design. Sequential mixed methods research involves more than one phase of data collection and analysis. For instance, in this design, the researcher will follow the use of one method with another in order to expand or elaborate on the initial set of findings. Take your time to read the information from the screen carefully. Mixed methods research designs. Quantitative and qualitative methods may also be merged so that qualitative data are quantized. For example, specific events in the data are counted as frequencies and numerically coded for statistical analysis. And quantitative data are qualitized. For instance, frequencies are turned into text, although this is extremely rare in practice. Both types of data may be also presented together on a matrix. Qualitative data may be presented on a diagram. Mixed methods research designs. The characteristics that help to define mixed methods research highlight how quantitative and qualitative methods may be combined in a number of ways to provide you with better opportunities to answer your research question. The next table outlines a number of reasons for and advantages of using a mixed method design. The specific nature of your mixed methods design will be related to particular reasons and advantages. The box 5.4 summarizes how mixed methods have been used in management research. Please take your time, and on the following two slides you will be shown box number 5.4 and the table 5.1. Research design of mixed methods. As we have just discussed, different combinations of mixed method research characteristics lead to various research designs. The principal mixed methods research designs summarized earlier in this section are concurrent triangulation design, then embedded design, sequential exploratory design, and sequential multi-phase design. Now we have reached the section number 4, recognizing the purpose of your research design. In previous section, we referred to your research following an exploratory or explanatory purpose. Research can be designed to fulfill either an exploratory, descriptive, explanatory, or evaluative purpose, or some combination of these. In the second lecture, we encouraged you to think about your research project in terms of the question you wish to answer and your research objectives. The way in which you ask your research question will involve you in exploratory, descriptive, or evaluative research. The purpose of your research may also change over time. In this section, we discuss each purpose in more detail to help you to choose which of these is appropriate to the nature of your own research project. Exploratory studies. An exploratory study is a valuable means to ask open questions to discover what is happening and gain insights about a topic of interest. As we noted, research questions that are exploratory are likely to begin with what or how. Questions that you ask during data collection to explore an issue, problem, or phenomenon will also be likely to start with what or how. An exploratory study is particularly useful if you wish to clarify your understanding of an issue, problem, or phenomena, such if you are unsure of its precise nature. Exploratory Studies Part 2. There are a number of ways to conduct exploratory research. These include a search of the literature, interviewing experts in the subject, conducting in-depth individual interviews, or conducting focus group interviews. Because of their exploratory nature, these interviews are likely to be relatively unstructured and to rely on the quality of contributions from those who participate to help guide the stage of your research. Exploratory research has the advantage that it is flexible and adaptable to change. Descriptive studies. It's time to talk about them. The purpose of descriptive research is to gain an accurate profile of events, persons, or situations. As we noted, research questions that are descriptive are likely to begin with who, what, where, when, and how. Questions that you ask during data collection to get a description of events, persons, or situations will also be likely to start with who, what, where, when, and how. Descriptive research may be an extension of a piece of exploratory research, and so on. It is necessary to have a clear picture of the phenomenon on which you wish to collect data prior to the collection of the data. It's time to talk about explanatory studies. Studies that establish relationships between variables may be termed explanatory research. As we noted earlier, research questions that seek explanatory answers are likely to begin with why or how. Questions that you seek or questions that you ask during data collection to gain an explanatory response will also be likely to start with or include why and how. The emphasis in explanatory research is to study a situation or a problem in order to explain the relationships between variables. Now it's time for evaluative studies. The purpose of evaluative research is to find out how well something works. As we noted earlier, research questions that seek to evaluate answers are likely to begin with how or include what in the forms of to what extent. Evaluative research in business and management is likely to be concerned with assessing the effectiveness of an organizational or business strategy, policy, program, initiative, or process. This may relate to any area of the organization or business. For example, evaluating a marketing campaign, a personal policy, a costing strategy, the delivery of a support service, and so on. Questions that you ask during data collection to seek an evaluative understanding will be likely to start with the what, how, or why. Combined studies. A research study may combine more than one purpose in its design. This may be achieved by the use of mixed methods in the research design to facilitate some combination of exploratory, descriptive, explanatory, or evaluative research. Alternatively, a single method research design may be used in a way that provides scope to facilitate more than one purpose. The next box, the box on the next slide, describes a qualitative study that used relatively unstructured interviews to facilitate collection of data that were exploratory, descriptive, and explanatory. Now we have reached the section number 5, choosing a research strategy or strategies. The different research strategies. In this section, we turn our attention to your choice of research strategy. In general terms, a strategy is a plan of action to achieve a goal. A research strategy may therefore be defined as a plan of how a researcher will go about answering her or his research question. It is a methodological link between your philosophy and choice of methods to collect and analyze data. The first two research strategies in the list below that we consider in this section are principally or exclusively linked to a quantitative research design. The next two may involve quantitative or qualitative research or mixed design combining both. The final four strategies are principally linked to a qualitative research design. In our experience, it is a choice between qualitative research strategies that is likely to cause the greatest confusion. Such confusion is often justified given the diversity of qualitative strategies with their conflicting intentions and blurred genders. In our discussion, we draw out the distinctions between three strategies to allow you to make an informed choice between qualitative strategies as between or across quantitative and qualitative strategies. Here we can see the list of strategies: experiment, survey, archival and documentary research, case study, ethnography, action research, grounded theory, narrative inquiry. Now we have reached the section number 6, choosing a time horizon. An important question to be asked in designing your research is, do I want my research to be a snapshot taken at a particular time, or do I want it to be more to a diary or a series of snapshots and be a representation of events over a given period? This will of course depend on your research question. The snapshot time horizon we call cross-sectional. Cross-sectional studies. It is probable that your research will be cross-sectional, involving the study of a particular phenomenon at a particular time. Cross-sectional studies often employ the survey strategy. They may be seeking to describe the incidence of phenomenon, or to explain how factors are related in different organizations. However, they may also use qualitative or mixed methods research strategies. For example, many case studies are based on interviews conducted over a short period of time. Longitudinal studies. The main strength of longitudinal research is its capacity to study change and development. This type of study may also provide you with a measure of control over some of the variables being studied. One of the best known examples of this type of research comes from outside the world of business. It is the long-running UK television series 7up. These have charted the progress of people every 7 years of their life. Now it's time to talk about the section number 7, establishing the ethics of the research design. Your choice of topic will be governed by ethical considerations. You may be particularly interested to study the consumer decision to buy flower bouquets. Although this may provide some interesting data collection challenges, who buys, for whom, and why, they are not the same ethical difficulties as will be involved in studying. Please think about what type of ethical problems could appear here. Establishing the ethics of the research design, Part 2. Your research design may need to consider whether you should collect data if those you are researching are unaware they are the subject of research and so have not consented. For instance, imagine that you are making some research in Baidu search engine, and Baidu is collecting the data on your account in terms of collecting your interest and research inquiries. So here we have the similar issue. The section number 8, establishing the quality of the research design. Underpinning our discussion of research design is the issue of the quality of the research and its findings. This is expressed by Raymond in his article, where he subjects findings to the "How do I know" test. Will the evidence and my conclusions stand up to the cause's scrutiny? Establishing the quality of the research design, Part 2. A split often occurs at this point between positivist and interpretivist researchers. The former will use the canons of scientific inquiry related to reliability and validity to assess the quality of their research. The latter either seek to adapt these terms to assess their research or to reject them as inappropriate to interpretivist studies. Now we are going to briefly discuss each of these approaches to establish and assess research quality. Scientific canons of inquiry, reliability and validity. Reliability and validity are central to judgments about the quality of research in the natural science and quantitative research in the social science. Their role in relation to qualitative research is contested, as I discussed later. Reliability refers to replication and consistency. If a researcher is able to replicate an earlier research design and achieve the same findings, then that research would be seen as being reliable. In a sense, validity refers to the appropriateness of the measures used, accuracy of the analysis of the results, and generalizability of the findings. Also, I would like you to think about the information below. The first, do the measures being used in the research to assess the phenomenon being studied actually measure what they are intended to? Are they appropriate for their intended purpose? The second, are the analyses of the results and the relationships being advanced accurate? What do the research findings represent? Does the claim about how generalizable they are stand up? External reliabilities refers to whether your data collection techniques and analytic procedures would produce consistent findings, if they were repeated by you on another occasion, or if they were replicated by a different researcher. Ensuring reliability is not necessarily easy, and a number of threats to reliability are described in the table 5.3 on the next slide. Your research findings would be seen as invalid when the findings has been arrived at falsely or when a reported relationship is inaccurate. There are a number of reasons that might threaten the internal validity of your research. We offer definitions and examples of the most frequent in the next table on the next slide. Research that produces invalid results and conclusions will also affect its reliability, since it will be highly unlikely for a study to find the same false results and statistical relationships. On the next slide, the table 5.4 will show some examples. Please take your time to read it carefully. External validity is concerned with the question, can a study's research findings be generalized to other relevant settings or groups? For example, a corporate manager may ask, can the findings from the research study in one organization in our corporation also be used to inform policy and practice in other organizations in the group? The chief executive of a country council may ask, are the findings from the survey in the finance and resource department applicable to other departments in the council? Just as researchers take great care when selecting a sample from within a population to make sure that it represents that population, Researchers and their clients are often concerned to establish the generalizability of their findings to other contexts. Even in such cases, however, it will be necessary to replicate the study in that other context or contexts to be able to establish such statistical generalizability. Let's talk about alternative triangulation involves using more than one source of data and method of collecting to confirm the validity, credibility, and authenticity of research data, analysis, and interpretation. The purpose is to use two or more independent sources of data and methods of collection within one study to ensure that the data are telling you what you think they are telling you. In a research study based on positivist assumptions, they will help to reveal the reality in the data. Interpretivist researchers challenge this outcome as they consider that in relation to studies involving people's beliefs, attitudes, and interpretations, reality is socially constructed and multifaceted. For interpretivists, the value of using triangulation is that it adds depth, complexity, and richness to their research. Participant or member validation. Participant or member validation involves taking or sending research data back to participants to allow them to confirm its accuracy by permitting them to comment on and correct it to validate the information. This may take the form of showing them interview transcripts, observation, or other notes, stored accounts, as well as researcher interpretations of participants' data. Participant collaboration is essential in some qualitative research strategies, such as action research, while forms of collaboration, such as member validation, will be important in other qualitative research strategies and in mixed method research. While the nature of quantitative data may preclude member validation, where you use a survey strategy, you may still find it useful to discuss the results from your quantitative analysis with a sample of your respondents to help you to explain and to interpret this data. Member validation may be problematic when a participant wishes to withdraw some of the data shared with you. Logic leaps and false assumptions. So far in this lecture, we have shown that there are a host of research design decisions to be made in order that your research project can yield sufficient good quality data. These decisions should be made in accordance with logical approach, along with any assumptions you make to stand up to careful scrutiny. Raymond, in his article, advises you to stand back from your research design and take a critical, objective view of it. This will allow you to see your design as others, so that you can examine the logic of the research steps you propose to take to see if they will stand up to rigorous scrutiny. Now we have reached the section number 9, taking into account your role as a researcher. This lecture has discussed the decisions you need to take to formulate your research design. You need to choose between quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods, between research strategies, and between time frames. Each decision will have implications for the nature of your design, between exploratory, descriptive, explanatory, or evaluative purpose, or some combination of these. Each decision also has implications for the ways in which you seek to establish a quality research design that is ethical. As you have heard through this lecture, you have probably been evaluating each of these decisions in relation to practical constraints as well as personal preferences. You can be external researcher or internal researcher. If you are a full-time student, you are likely to adopt the role of an external researcher, as you need to identify an organization with which to conduct your research. In such cases, you need to negotiate access to the organization and to those from whom you would like to collect data. Having achieved this, you need to gain their trust so that they will participate meaningfully to allow you to collect this data. You need to take these practical factors into account when formulating your research questions and your research design. Now it's time to talk about the internal researcher. As an internal researcher, another advantage for you will be your knowledge of the organization, and all this implies about understanding the complexity of what goes on in that organization. It will be not necessary to spend a great deal of time learning the context in the same way as an external researcher will need to do. However, this advantage carries with it a significant disadvantage. You must be very conscious of the assumptions and the stereotypes that you carry around with you. Another problem for internal researcher is the time. Combining two roles at work is obviously very demanding, particularly as it may involve you in much data recording after hours. This activity is hidden from those who determine your workload. They may not appreciate the demands that your researcher role is making on you. For this reason, practitioner researchers may need to negotiate a proportion of their work time to devote to their research. There are no easy answers to these problems. All you can do is be aware of the possible impact on your research of being too close to your research settings. There are some guidance for internal researchers. These include reflecting on your role as an internal researcher so that you may recognize how this affects the way you design and conduct your research. The research you undertake and the report you produce may have implications for those you work with, and you will therefore need to consider the implications of how you research and what you report. You need to consider your emotions and to manage these during the process of being an internal researcher. The process of analyzing, interpreting, and theorizing about the research data you collect may have the effect of making strange the all too familiar. And you need to cope with the degree of detachment that this may produce as you re-evaluate the way in which you view the company and organization. Now it's time to make some summaries. The first, research design is the way a research question and objectives are operationalized into a research project. The research design process involves a series of decisions that need to combine into a coherent research project. Research design will be informed by your research philosophy. And the third one, a choice has to be made to use quantitative or qualitative methods, or both, to create a mono-method, multi-method, or mixed-method research design. Summary Part 2. The focus of your research will be exploratory, descriptive, explanatory, evaluative, or a combination of these. A decision will be made to use one or more research strategies related to the nature of the research question and objectives, and to ensure coherence with the other elements of your research design. Possible research strategies include experiment, survey, then documentary research, case study, ethnography, action research, grounded theory, and narrative inquiry. All of them will be discussed in the second part of our topic. Summary Part 3. Choice of research strategy or strategies will be related to use of an appropriate time horizon. Research ethics play a critical part in formulating a research design. Establishing the quality of research is also a critical part of formulating a research design. Researchers from different research traditions have developed different criteria to judge and ensure the quality of research. Practical considerations will also affect research design, including the role of the researcher. Self-check questions. Imagine that you wish to study the reasons why car owners join manufacturer-sponsored owners' clubs. You choose to use a qualitative methodology and narrative inquiry research strategy involving unstructured discussions with some members of this owners' club. You are asked by a small group of marketing managers to explain why you choosing research design is as valid as a quantitative methodology, so a strategy that uses a questionnaire. What will you reply for this group of managers? That's the first self-check question. The second self-check question is on the screen. Imagine you are working in an organization that has branched throughout the country. The managing director is mindful of the fact that managers of the branch need to talk over common problems on a regular basis. That is why there have always been monthly meetings. However, she is becoming increasingly concerned that these meetings are not cost-effective. Too many managers see them as an unwelcome intrusion. They feel that their time would be better spent pursuing their principal job objectives. Other managers see it as a day off, an opportunity to recharge the batteries. She asked you to carry out some research on the cost-effectiveness of the monthly meetings. You have defined the research question you are seeking to answer as what are the managers' opinions of the value of their monthly meetings. Your principal research strategy will be a survey using a questionnaire to all managers who attend the monthly meetings. However, you are keen to triangulate your findings. How might you do this? You can make a reference to the theory what is triangulation in data collection. The self-check question number 3. Imagine you have started conducting interviews in a university with non-academic employees. The research objective is to establish the extent to which those employees feel a sense of belonging to the university. You have negotiated access to your interviews through the head of each of the appropriate departments. In each case, you have been presented with a list of interviews. It soon becomes apparent to you that you are getting a rather rosier picture than you expected. The interviews are all very positive about their jobs, their managers, and the university. This makes you a bit suspicious. Are all of the non-academic staff as positive as this? Are you being given only the employees who can be relied on to tell the good news? Have they been got added by their manager? There is a great risk that your results will not be valid, so the question is, what can you do? Think about the anonymous questionnaires and so on. The final self-check question, number 4. Imagine you are about to embark on a year-long study of customer service training for sales assistants in 2 national supermarket companies. The purpose of the research is to compare the way in which the training develops and its effectiveness. What measures would you need to take in the research design stage to ensure that your results were valid? Review and discussion questions. Agree with a friend to watch the same television documentary and answer the following questions. Does the documentary use a quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods research methodology? To what extent is the nature of the documentary exploratory, descriptive, explanatory, evaluative, or a combination of these? What other observations can you make about the research strategy or strategies the documentary makers have used in their program? Do not forget to make notes regarding your reasons for your answers to each of these questions and to discuss these answers with your friend or in small groups during the class. The second review and discussion question, I recommend you to do it after you have watched the second video lecture of this topic. So the question is to use the search facilities of an online database to download articles which have used, firstly, a case study, secondly, action research, and thirdly, experiment research strategy in area of your interest. Download a copy of each article, and what reasons do the article's authors give for the choice of strategy? The second task, please visit Online Gateway to the European Union website and click on the link in your own language. Discuss with a friend how you might use the data available via links from this web page in archival research. In particular, you should concentrate on the research questions you might be able to answer using these data to represent part of the reality you would be researching. Thank you for your attention. During the lecture, we were talking about research design, and now it's time to watch the TED Talk video delivered by Tony Fadell about the first secret of great designs.
In the great 1980s movie, The Blues Brothers, there's a scene where John Belushi goes to visit Dan Aykroyd in his apartment in Chicago for the very first time. It's a cramped, tiny space, and it's just 3 feet away from the train tracks. As John sits on Dan's bed, a train goes rushing by, rattling everything in the room. John asks, "How often does that train go by?" Dan replies, "So often, you won't even notice it." And then something falls off the wall. We all know what he's talking about. As human beings, we get used to everyday things really fast. As a product designer, it's my job to see those everyday things, to feel them, and try to improve upon them. For example, see this piece of fruit? See this little sticker? That sticker wasn't there when I was a kid. But somewhere as the years passed, someone had the bright idea to put that sticker on the fruit. Why? So it could be easier for us to check out at the grocery counter. Well, that's great. We can get in and out of the store quickly. But now there's a new problem. When we get home and we're hungry and we see this ripe, juicy piece of fruit on the counter, we just want to pick it up and eat it. Except now, we have to look for this little sticker and dig at it with our nails, damaging the flesh. Then rolling up that sticker, you know what I mean, and then trying to flick it off your fingers, right? It's not fun. Not at all. But something interesting happened. See, the first time you did it, you probably felt those feelings. You just wanted to eat the piece of fruit, but you felt upset. You just wanted to dive in. By the 10th time, you started to become less upset. And you started to just do the peeling the label off. By the 100th time, at least for me, I became numb to it. I simply picked up the piece of fruit, dug at it with my nails, tried to flick it off, and then wonder, was there another sticker? So why is that? Why do we get used to everyday things? Well, as human beings, we have limited brain power. And so our brains encode the everyday things we do into habits. So we can free up space to learn new things. It's a process called habituation. And it's one of the most basic ways as humans we learn. Now, habituation isn't always bad. Remember learning to drive? I sure do. Your hands clenched at 10 and 2 on the wheel, looking at every single object out there, the cars, the lights, the pedestrians, is a nerve-wracking experience. So much so that I couldn't even talk to anyone else in the car, and I couldn't even listen to music. But then something interesting happened. As the weeks went by, driving became easier and easier. You habituated it. It started to become fun and second nature. And then you could talk to your friends again and listen to music. So there's a good reason why our brains habituate things. If we didn't, we'd notice every little detail all the time. It would be exhausting, and we'd have no time to learn about new things. But sometimes habituation isn't good. If it stops us from noticing the problems that are around us, well, that's bad. And if it stops us from noticing and fixing those problems, well, then that's really bad. Comedians know all about this. Jerry Seinfeld's entire career was built on noticing those little details, those idiotic things we do every day that we don't even remember. He tells us about the time he visited his friends and he just wanted to take a comfortable shower. He'd reach out and grab the handle and turn it slightly one way, and it was 100 degrees too hot. And then he'd turn it the other way, and it was 100 degrees too cold. He just wanted a comfortable shower. Now, we've all been there. We just don't remember it. But Jerry did, and that's a comedian's job. But designers, innovators, and entrepreneurs, it's our job to not just notice those things, but to go one step further and try to fix them. See this? This person, this is Mary Anderson. In 1902 in New York City, she was visiting. It was a cold, wet, snowy day, and she was warm inside a streetcar. As she was going to her destination, she noticed the driver opening the window to clean off the excess snow so he could drive safely. When he opened the window, though, he let all this cold, wet air inside, making all the passengers miserable. Now, probably most of those passengers just thought, it's a fact of life. He's got to open the window to clean it. That's just how it is. But Mary didn't. Mary thought, what if the driver could actually clean the windshield from the inside so that he could stay safe and drive, and the passengers could actually stay warm? So she picked out her sketchbook right then and there and began drawing what would become the world's first windshield wiper. Now, as a product designer, I try to learn from people like Mary, to try to see the world the way it really is, not the way we think it is. Why? Because it's easy to solve a problem that almost everyone sees, but it's hard to solve a problem that almost no one sees. Now, some people think you're born with this ability, or you're not, as if Mary Anderson was hardwired at birth to see the world more clearly. That wasn't the case for me. I had to work at it. During my years at Apple, Steve Jobs challenged us to come into work every day, to see our products through the eyes of the customer, the new customer, the one that has fears and possible frustrations, and hopeful exhilaration that their new technology product could work straight away for them. He called it staying beginners. and wanted to make sure that we focused on those tiny little details to make them faster, easier, and seamless for the new customers. So I remember this clearly in the very earliest days of the iPod. See, back in the 90s, being a gadget freak like I am, I would rush out to the store for the very, very latest gadget. I'd take all the time to get to the store, I'd check out, I'd come back home, I'd start to unbox it. And then there was another little sticker. The one that said, charge before use. What? I can't believe it. I just spent all this time buying this product and now I have to charge before use? I have to wait what felt like an eternity to use that coveted new toy? It was crazy. But you know what? Almost every product back then did that. When it had batteries in it, you had to charge it before you used it. Well, Steve noticed that, and he said, we're not going to let that happen to our product. So what did we do? Typically, when you have a product that has a hard drive in it, you run it for about 30 minutes in the factory to make sure that hard drive is going to be working years later for the customer after they pull it out of the box. What did we do instead? We ran that product for over 2 hours. Why? Well, first off, we could make a higher quality product, be easy to test, and make sure it was great for the customer. But most importantly, the battery came fully charged right out of the box, ready to use. So that customer could just, with all that exhilaration, could just start using the product. It was great, and it worked. People liked it. Now today, almost every product that you get that's battery powered comes out of the box fully charged, even if it doesn't have a hard drive. But back then, we noticed that detail, and we fixed it. And now everyone else does that as well. No more charge before use. So why am I telling you this? Well, it's seeing the invisible problem, not just the obvious problem. That's important, not just for product design, but for everything we do. You see, there are invisible problems all around us, ones we can solve. But first, we need to see them, to feel them. So I'm hesitant to give you any tips about neuroscience or psychology. There's far too many experienced people in the TED community who will know much more about that than I ever will. But let me leave you with a few tips that I do, that we all can do, to fight habituation. My first tip is to look broader. You see, when you're tackling a problem, sometimes there are a lot of steps that lead up to that problem, and sometimes a lot of steps after it. If you can take a step back and look broader, maybe you can change some of those boxes before the problem. Maybe you can combine them. Maybe you can remove them altogether to make that better. Take thermostats, for instance. In the 1900s, when they first came out, they were really simple to use. You could turn them up or turn them down. People understood them. But in the 1970s, the energy crisis struck, and customers started thinking about how to save energy. So what happened? Thermostat designers decided to add a new step. Instead of just turning up and down, you now had to program it, so you could tell it the temperature you wanted at a certain time. Now that seemed great. Every thermostat had started adding that feature. But it turned out that no one saved any energy. Now why is that? Well, people couldn't predict the future. They just didn't know how their weeks would change season to season, year to year. So no one was saving energy. And what happened? Thermostat designers went back to the drawing board and they focused on that programming step. They made better UIs. They made better documentation. But still, years later, people were not saving any energy because they just couldn't predict the future. So what do? We put a machine learning algorithm in instead of the programming that would simply watch when you turned it up and down, when you liked a certain temperature when you got up or when you went away. And you know what? It worked. People are saving energy without any programming. So it doesn't matter what you're doing. If you take a step back and look at all the boxes, maybe there's a way to remove one or combine them so you can make that process much simpler. So that's my first tip. Look broader. For my second tip, it's to look closer. One of my greatest teachers was my grandfather. He taught me all about the world. He taught me how things were built and how they were repaired, the tools and techniques necessary to make a successful project. I remember one story he told me about screws and about how you need to have the right screw for the right job. There were many different screws: wood screws, metal screws, anchors, concrete screws. The list went on and on. Our job is to make products that are easy to install for all of our customers themselves without professionals. So what did we do? I remembered that story that my grandfather told me. And so we thought, how many different screws could we put in the box? Was it going to be 2, 3, 4, 5? Because there's so many different wall types. So we thought about it, we optimized it, and we came up with 3 different screws to put in the box. We thought that was going to solve the problem, but it turned out it didn't. So we shipped the product, and people weren't having a great experience. So what did we do? We went back to the drawing board just instantly after we figured out we didn't get it right. And we designed a special screw, a custom screw, much to the chagrin of our investors. They were like, "Why are you spending so much time on a little screw? Get out there and sell more." And we said, "We will sell more if we get this right." And it turned out we did. With that custom little screw, there was just one screw in the box. It was easy to mount and put on the wall. So if we focus on those tiny details, the ones we might, or that we may not see, and we look at them and we say, are those important, or is that the way we've always done it? Maybe there's a way to get rid of those. So my last piece of advice is to think younger. Every day I'm confronted with interesting questions from my 3 young kids. They come up with questions like, why can't cars fly around traffic? Or why don't my shoelaces have Velcro instead? Sometimes those questions are smart. My son came to me the other day and I asked him, "Hey, go run out to the mailbox and check it." He looked at me, puzzled, and said, "Why doesn't the mailbox just check itself and tell us when it has mail?" I was like, that's a pretty good question. So they can ask tons of questions, and sometimes we find out we just don't have the right answers. We say, "Son, that's just the way the world works." So the more we're exposed to something, the more we get used to it. But kids haven't been around long enough to get used to those things. And so when they run into problems, they immediately try to solve them. And sometimes they find a better way. And that way really is better. So my advice, and that we take to heart, is to have young people on your team, or people with young minds. Because if you have those young minds, they cause everyone in the room to think younger. Picasso once said, "Every child is an artist." The problem is when he or she grows up, is how to remain an artist. We all saw the world more clearly when we saw it for the first time, before a lifetime of habits got in the way. Our challenge is to get back to there, to feel that frustration, to see those little details, to look broader, look closer, and to think younger, so we can stay beginners. It's not easy. It requires us pushing back against one of the most basic ways we make sense of the world. But if we do, we can do some pretty amazing things. For me, hopefully that's better product design. For you, that could mean something else, something powerful. Our challenge is to wake up each day and say, how can I experience the world better? And if we do, maybe, just maybe, we can get rid of these dumb little stickers. Thank you very much.